Well, let's start there. Let's talk about what the solutions are moving forward. I know you mentioned on Twitter a little bit, 1-2s, and we could have seen more of that. Um, I think if you look at, well, first of all, let's just fire off the stats. And again, the reason why we say, if you replay this game 9 times out of 10 or whatever, you probably come out on top. You mentioned it, 36 shots. Um, Cadiz had an XG of 0.24. They did really little apart from, there was the Acapo chance early from a corner. Then there was the Negredo chance in transition in the 73rd minute when Hazard loses the ball and Negredo nearly scores, but it goes just wide. So those are the two big moments. We had big chances from Benzema, Militao, Hazard, and Vinicius in the box. We had a million shots from outside the box, which has been the theme for quite a while now. I thought Cadiz, by the way, did a really good job of just clogging zone 14. I know it seems a little bit silly, to limit long distance shots, but, given the fact that Kroos likes to look up and fire it, same with Casemiro, every time they did, there was just a million bodies converging on them, and they rotated very quickly. Credit to Cadiz. I saw some people upset, this is ruining the game, and we need Super League. These are real takes, by the way. We need Super League. We can't have these. We can't play against these low blocks. It's not football. I'm like, man, come on. What do you want Cadiz to do? You want Cervera himself said it after the game, where he was like, our other option is to play with the ball and get murdered. So I'm pretty happy with the result tonight. And credit to him. I thought they defended well. I did think, if you're talking about how to break a low block, I thought there were things you could have taken away from the second half as at least positives. The next time this happens, and Athletic will play a pretty deep block, knowing them and how we play against them. Last time we played against them was very difficult, so we'll have to face this again on Wednesday. It may not be as dramatic as Cadiz, and I think they'll try to go at us a little bit, especially the fact that it's San Mamés. But it's still something. It's a good organized defensive team, right? And we struggled with that earlier in this run. But I thought there were positives from the second half to take away. So maybe we can start with what was the difference between the first half and second half? And I don't expect you to go on this monologue of massive differences and to say the second half we were so superior, because I don't think that was necessarily the case. Because in the end it was still 0-0. But I did feel there was a little bit of a shift. I like Hazard's role a bit more in the second half. I thought we were doing a little bit better. I thought Vinicius grew into the game as the game wore on. But what was the issue for you in the first half? What was it that was glaring to you?
I think in the first half I actually was so a couple of things that can break down a low block, I guess, first, just because that kind of paves the way of what I found as the issue in the first half. And so you mentioned kind of those quick combos, which we saw in the second half between Hazard and Benzema, which probably created our best chance. Yeah. I think really quick ball circulation, and not only quick ball circulation, but switching the field to the weak side. Once you bring the opposition's defense all over to one side, you kind of draw them in, and then you do a quick switch to the opposite weak flank and exploit that space. And then just individual quality, guys like Vinicius. We've talked about Marcelo and Isco in the past, guys who can take defenders on, maybe multiple defenders on 1v1, and just create space and create something out of nothing. And so in the first half, it was interesting to see that Carlo went with traditional with the 4-3-3 and played Hazard on the right wing. I think most people going into the game thought it would be a 4-4-2 with Hazard partnering Benzema up top, Fede and Vini on the wings. And I was okay with that. I was actually thinking to myself, yeah, let's keep the momentum of what we've got going on and keep the shape. And Carlos talked about how this team knows how to play 4-3-3. But I think the issue was Hazard wasn't entirely comfortable. He kept trying to dribble centrally. He would start really wide on the right wing and then would come in dribbling centrally and would just kind of clog the space and didn't really combine with anyone. And then I thought Fede tried to do the job of moving out to the right wing whenever Hazard came in, but we never recirculated possession back out there. And so I felt like in the first half, we didn't see those combos. We didn't see Vinicius have really much of the ball or any success going 1v1. And I saw that you asked a question in the press conference, and you asked the Cadiz coach, like, what was your plan for Vinicius and Hazard? And he said they didn't really have a plan for Hazard, but for Vinicius, they looked to push him out wide and make him cross rather than cut in centrally. And that's exactly what happened in the first. Like, anytime Vinicius got the ball, he never. I can't really think of any opportunities he had coming in centrally or combining. He was pretty much relegated just to the flank and getting crosses in. So I think that's where our issue was. And you just have poor performances. Like, Casemiro's gave away the ball more than he had in any other La Liga match. I don't know if you saw that stat, but
No.
he gave the ball away more than he had in any other La Liga match. Lucas Vazquez didn't have a single cross connect in the first half. I think it's kind of been talked about pretty heavily on Twitter was how Ferland Mendy was occupying spaces that didn't kind of support Vinicius and allow him to go into those central channels. He was actually taking up that space and wasn't allowing Vinicius to run into it. And so today, actually, when I think about it, it's a shame Marcelo had as part of his COVID crew, because I think he would have been perfect for this game. Doesn't have to play any defense, can combine down the left wing with Vinicius, he's probably the best crosser on the team. Like, Marcelo would have been great for this match.
He entered my mind for sure. So there's a lot in what you just said, and I think that there's a lot of interesting things and a lot of branches we can get out of that discussion. I think so. The reason I asked that question to Cervera after the game was like, and I specifically said, especially in the first half, because I thought the second half we were a little bit better. And to your question, like, when did Vinicius actually cut in? I think it only happened one time. I think it was like the 61st minute where he cuts in. He only has to beat one defender in that situation. Cadiz, for some reason, they don't send help in that moment. Actually, I think it was a transition opportunity because Cruz shows himself as an outlet, which Casemiro or Alaba finds. I can't remember which one that was passing out of the back. Cruz gets it, plays a one-touch through ball to Vinicius, and he's off, and he only has one defender to beat. And he cuts it in, but he shoots it right at Ledesma. And so that was like the only time. So Cervera said, like, we wanted Vinicius to go outside as much as he wanted, basically. Let him do that. Let him do his cutbacks. Let him cross it. And he did. Like, there were a couple of occasions where he actually burned his man and got a cutback across. But they were okay with that. And it was usually Acapo who was on Vinicius one-on-one. And they didn't let him cut in centrally. And I think part of the solution to that is because someone asked me on Twitter, it's like, okay, so if coaches start using that as their game plan versus Vinicius, if they start just sending multiple bodies to prevent the cut-ins, just send help, lots of coverage, how do we combat that in future games? And I think like part of the solution is a little bit simple that we didn't really see much today, in that Mendy needs to do more overlaps to drag defenders away. If Mendy was doing a lot of underlaps and he was just kind of, the connection with Vinicius wasn't there today as much as in games in past where Real Madrid actually have space to attack on the wing when Mendy can carry the ball. When you have to face slow blocks, Mendy's not as efficient in those situations, right? I mean, defensively, he's a beast. I mean, poor was it Lozano, who basically, he tried to escape Militao a couple times. He would have to come over and see Mendy, and then he would come over to the left, and Militao would just absolutely own him and had him in his back pocket. Between those two, they basically just destroyed Lozano. So defensively, there's never a question with Mendy, but I do think offensively he needed to make overlapping runs that maybe Marcelo could have done to at least just drag some space away this way for Vinicius so that Vinicius can cut in. I think that's part of the thing that changed in the second half, was that, to me, it was very clear after the end of this game, Hazard can't play as a right winger. It just can't happen. As much as, we'll try to make that work. Well, the idea when Hazard was a better player was can we get these guys to coexist? One goes in the left, one goes in the right. Immediately when he came over to the left side and started combining with Vinicius and Benzema in tight spaces, Cadiz couldn't really defend that. And in those were tight quadrants, and those three linked up well on the left side. And then at that point, you can just basically leave the right wing for those switches. Whether it's Carvajal or Vasquez or Fede, who I thought was the only source of good production from the right wing, and he was even doing much. He was just basically carrying the ball when he could and dragging defenders around with his off-ball runs. So to me, Hazard has to play on the left if they're gonna do this again on Wednesday, because that's another thing. Ancelotti after the press conference was like, I don't know what the heck just happened to my camera, but it's gone. But I think like that's what they have to do. Is like Ancelotti was like, I'm not sure what to do on Wednesday. I'm missing all my right wingers. If he decides to go with Hazard again, I think it has to be more of like an asymmetrical formation where you're going to have to just soak up all the possession on the left and leave the right wing completely free for a switch. I think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, if he's going to go with Hazard again, I actually think you're probably better off just playing Fede as the right winger and tucking Hazard in as just a more advanced central midfielder. And you're going to have to hope that you don't get sliced through in transition and that he can do some of the defensive work that you need from a central midfielder. Because to your point, I think it was glaringly obvious to everyone that he's not as good on the right wing. He was totally anonymous in the first half. Second half, he was better, but I still don't think he was like amazing. I've seen some people just calling him out as like the best player in the second half and all this, and I'm just like, he was definitely better. He was definitely impactful, but the bar is so low compared to like what we know of Hazard and like what we saw in the first half versus the second half, that I think that's kind of playing into people's heads when they're evaluating that second half. And the frustrating thing for me is something that we talked about a lot, is just the explosiveness isn't there anymore. And he just, there was one time where he tried to take on a Cadiz defender and just beat him for pace, and the ball got taken from him. And that was the only time he really tried to beat somebody for pace. And so, but where he's really effective and where like, this is where I wanted to see more in the second half was those quick 1-2s, we all know he can do those little flicks and the Cruyff and the dummies that in and around the box, that if they work, if he pulls it off, which he actually has a decent success rate with, then that can lead to breaking down a low block. And he and Benzema had a couple of those moments in the second half, and it just, it nearly worked out. But that's what I wanted to see more of from him, and him kind of moving into that central channel. He basically just, in the second half, I don't think he started on the wing, like on the actual flank, on the white chalk ever, compared to the first half when he did pretty much every attack. So I think that was a clear change from Ancelotti, and it worked. But it's just, you're breaking up the whole system and the formation that teams used to playing, and that this team knows for Hazard. And is that really worth it? I guess that's the question.
My answer to that would be probably not, but I think when you're missing Asensio and Rodrigo and Bale, you can probably have to throw it in there. Like, I understand, like, people were like, I know Lucas himself said on Twitter, like, he's just so quote unquote bad. I don't even know if he used the word bad, but it wasn't a flattering statement. But like, if you're going to put him on the field and tailor your scheme around him, he's just not good enough to merit that. And like the fact is, like, and you're right, it's a low bar. So like, when people were going crazy on Twitter, if I didn't see that, but I assume that there's two kinds of people going crazy on Twitter. One is Hazard fanboy 97 on Twitter, or like, what are the other football Twitter terms? Hazardology, Hazard-esque. What else do they do? It's just one of those football Twitter fan accounts. Either that, or it's just somebody who's just really, really, really hoping and wanting to see this guy succeed because we paid a lot of money for him. And he seems to be a likable guy who, we just wished maybe worked a little bit harder, came to the seasons in shape, and took care of his body a bit more. And we just want him to succeed. And I think part of the obvious reason that he's not able to play on the right wing, for example, is because he's not going to take players on. If he comes over to the left, he doesn't necessarily need to take players on because he can let Vinicius do that, and he can just play that more preferred. Like at this stage of his career, he wants to play a 10 role where he can kind of connect the dots in tight spaces. He's very good still at that. You can put him in a tight spot, and he'll do one touch, two touches, 1-2s, back heel flicks, which obviously that's his bread and butter. In that role, it makes sense, but as a right winger, it doesn't. And but I do think that even still, you can tell. I think he's like, this is not a player who's like 80% of his best self from his peak. This is a player to me who's like 10 to 20% of his old self, which is not good enough, because like there were even a few times where you see him, he has space to run in transition and he's just slow. He can't explode out of a pressure situation the way he used to. Even in open water and open transition attack, he just can't explode. He can't carry the ball that fast up the field. So you just can't. So like in a very niche role, when you're connecting the dots on the left side, it works. But again, that's not going to be every game you can do that. And it took basically two wingers. Let me ask you a question. We'll play that game that we sometimes play. Agree or disagree? Ancelotti said before the game, Hazard is not there because of the injuries. He's not starting because of the injuries. He's starting because of the work he's done in training. Believe it or not.
I mean, I guess I would say agree, just because maybe he's been training better than he normally does, and that's fine. But I think the reason he's starting is just because we're missing three of our other right wing options. So I don't know. I honestly, this is a question I was going to ask you. Do you think Carlo, if everyone was fit and there were no COVID injuries or anything, do you think Carlo would have rotated at all?
No chance.
I don't think so.
No.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I think Modric would have played. Obviously, Benzema did play. I think everyone would have played. I think it's.
Yeah.
I mean, look, it's. We know it by now. He goes game to game. He doesn't look ahead in the schedule. He goes game to game,
yeah.
And if people fall down, then you just next man up. Modric fell ill. It took a fever and some chills. Thankfully, not COVID, but he's that's what it took for him to get benched at this point. Plus, you have that Christmas break coming up, which is no international break. Also, it's just literally break, which is nice to see. But no, I don't think he would have rotated. No, not you. I just don't think the word the word rotate is not in his vocabulary. It means nothing to him. He just goes game to game. That's it. Every game, he won't say it's a final, but it's like he treats it like a final. And if people fall off along the way with injuries or suspensions, then it's next man up. He has a good deep bench to do that.